So without further ado, I'm about to call you Sizzle because that's what she doing. But classy lady, tell me, who do we have today? Who do we have today?
Today we have another doctor. We have Dr. Lakeitha Poole. She is the assistant sports director of mental health for LSU athletes and a member of the NFL's mental health board. That's major. A New Orleans native, she also runs small talk counseling and consulting. With her expertise, creates a safe space for clients to grow and thrive. Y'all already know what to do. Let's give a warm We Talk Weekly welcome to Dr. Lakeitha Poole.
How are you? How are you?
Good. How are y'all? I know my southern accent saying, how are y'all?
It's all good. It's all good. We good.
I like New Orleans dialect.
No, it's New Orleans.
New Orleans.
It's New Orleans.
New Orleans.
No doubt. No doubt. So first of all, thanks for coming to the show. Really appreciate it.
Me.
And I would say, since we're talking about mental health, right? And we're talking about athletes, because that's your scope. Let's jump right into the Olympics.
Yeah.
And, we have... all right, so I'm going to preface this by saying this, right? So there has been a lot of, commentary about Simone Biles, right? And them talking about her hair to... them now upset that she saluted someone from Brazil, to all this chatter, and Simone Biles can't do nothing wrong with me, so I'm like her biggest fan, right? But I'm my concern is her mental health, and for something like that, or athlete like that constantly get berated with bad commentary or people pointing fingers or anything of that matter, what would you say to a Simone Biles or any athlete that would go through something like that?
Yeah, I think, she's actually a great example of what it looks like when somebody understands that, the noise and the commentary from people who could never even come close to physically doing the things that she does. I think because what we saw during the last Olympics, where she stepped away for a bit and took time to figure out herself and to figure out what was going on with her. She's talked a lot during this Olympics about how she stayed in touch with her therapist while being in Paris, and her therapist is back here in the US, and like prioritizing what she needs. And so it's interesting because I don't know that people would feel the same way if she was talking about other ways to like physically maintain her body, right? Like athletes, after they compete, they get treatment from their athletic trainers. They see the team doctors. It's no different with our brains. Our brains are a physical part of our body too. And so I'm proud of her for being able to do that. So I would tell any athlete, you have to know what works best for you and for your body. And for her, it's her mind. Gymnastics is a pretty mental sport, but I mean, we could pick any of the greats, and I would be willing to bet that most of them had some sort of way of taking care of themselves mentally, emotionally. The men's basketball team, they just won, as well, a little while ago. And, I think about folks who aren't competing anymore, the D Wades who's doing commentary for it, Serena Williams, like people who we all know obviously are goated in their status of being the greatest athletes in the world. They know what it meant for them to have to be there. And so I think if we can, lay off a little bit of these, in some ways they're superhumans, they're regular people, but they're superhumans in what they do to train all year long for these big moments. So I'm proud of her.
So we have, as we'll stay on the Olympics just a little while longer, because I want to talk about the Sha'Carri Richardsons, her going through her valleys and peaks as it relates to, just performing, her trying to stay consistent with the performance and the expectations that the world has for her, right? How big of a burden is that for an athlete, right? Especially if you're looking at me to achieve and I fall short, right? But then you see she just last her, the 4x1 where she excelled, right? She came from behind and then won. Shout out to I love that's another one. I love me some Sha'Carri, right? And so how do we assist, not necessarily assist per se, but what do you tell, people, because it's not just athletes, right? What do you say when, you may not achieve and then you finally, make the grade, so to speak, but then sometimes get knocked back off the horse? How do you recover from that?
Yeah, I think it's the last part of what you just said. Like we're all human, and so it would be, I think, a strange thing if we didn't have goals or if we didn't have things that we wanted to achieve, and that we all know it takes effort and energy to make those things happen. And so with somebody like Sha'Carri, who, fortunately, I've seen her in her element in the collegiate space at LSU, and so I recognize that there's a part of athlete identity that a lot of times people, I think, just choose to ignore, in that, yes, they're human, but also, like, think about the ages of some of these athletes. They're, early 20s, and they're just figuring out life as people. And so the same way we all want to excel when we're on our jobs, we're performers too. We want to be able to, make mistakes and be able to bounce back. We also want people to see that we're more than just maybe the roles or the things that they want us to accomplish in that moment. And so I'm proud of her. I feel like she's FloJo reincarnated, who I was a fan of as a little girl. And so just her tenacity and her ability to, have what I'm sure some people might think of as like a don't care attitude, but in actuality, kind of like we were talking about with Simone, when you're the best, you sort of have to walk in that. You have to be able to be like, this is who I am. And I think that maintains actually a healthy mental state for athletes like that. But I think also it allows for there to be grace for themselves, which is really the only person to most of them that matter. When something doesn't go their way, it just gives them the fuel that they need to get back out there and do it again. And she's another great example. This, the last Olympics, she was trying to sort it out and figure it out for Tokyo. Didn't make it didn't happen. And then she's back and better than ever. And she's even been quoted saying that, she's not just back, she's better. And so I think being able to know yourself as a human, whether you're an athlete or not, it makes a huge difference in what excelling and being resilient really looks like.
I have one more question about the Olympics, because I think, when I think of what you're into, your scope and your specialty, just the circle of emotions, right? That I see, that not only the athletes, but the people who's watching and supporting these athletes. And I think this right here, right, may become, or may be a shock to everyone, because this just popped up in my feed, right? It says Jordan Childs stripped of Olympic bronze medal. Now, I didn't vet that, right? But this was on, I believe it was on, hold on one second. I didn't get a chance to vet this, but it seemed that it was essence. And so it seemed that the other team actually put in another protest, right? And they found that because of the 1 minute rule, they were supposed to put the challenge in before 1 minute, but it happened after 1 minute. So the possibility of her bronze being stripped from her mentally, emotionally, physically, that can drive someone insane, right? And so what would be, first of all, what's your thoughts on that? And two, how would you address something like that to an athlete who came to you? Say, for example, Jordan Childs was your client. Like, how would you talk to her if emotionally she came to you upset because that had truly happened, right? And I have to say, because I didn't vet it, but
I just saw something right before hopping on with y'all about it too. I haven't seen the full details of what happened or what the rule was, but I think that's interesting because it's a rule that obviously, like, the performing entities, every country, we're all supposed to be aware of those things. And so it really isn't the athlete's fault that if some challenge or, whatever came in late. So that's a tough one. I do think, though, if it ends up being true and that is what happens, again, I think from an observing fan of Jordan's and those athletes for that particular sport, I think she will be okay. But I think one of the things I have to make sure that from a clinical perspective that I would talk to her about is making sure that she doesn't feel like something that is, based on a rule or based on sort of an outside decision, doesn't affect the way in which she views her performance in order to earn that medal. I think it was looking, I don't know how much y'all followed Jim from the beginning of the Olympics, but like, it wasn't even looking at that Jordan was going to get to compete for an individual medal in the first place, and someone got sick, and so there were all these kind of crazy circumstances about her competing. And I think it's, you know, it's almost ironic, and so in those moments, it's figuring out like where that person learns to, you know, laugh off the craziness of sport, because sports are wild, and then also supporting her, obviously, and being able to recognize, like, you know, she's still a gold medalist. Team USA itself got their gold medal. And if individually that has changed something, you know, for her, she's also earned other medals before. And so, I mean, I think she's earned other, you know, in other ways that she's been a well-accomplished athlete, and she's not done yet. And so I think being able to, you know, encourage an athlete in that way, knowing that sometimes circumstances happen, just like in life, that you have to be able to, you know, be okay to know what your contribution was and what it wasn't. In this case, it sounds like it really wasn't her contribution. It was rules.
Yeah. Dr. Poole, thank you for that. Thank you for your analysis on the Olympics.
I did my best. I know.
Excellent analysis. And I appreciate that. So now let's get into you, because this conversation, this interview is about you. So I want to start with, you know, first of all, how are you? How are you doing? How's your mental health, right? I normally start a conversation with how are you, and I want to start there. How are you, and how's your mental health?
I appreciate that. I don't get asked that often. I'm asking that to most people every day, all day. So I'm well. It is an exciting time, like in sport, and so that makes my job, which is different every day, fun. And, you know, obviously watching the Olympics, and then my role full time is working in the collegiate space, and, you know, working at a large institution, at SEC school like LSU is never a dull moment. And, you know, so I try to do my best to find a balance of taking care of myself and just getting ready to start another season of sports. And so I'm well.
Fantastic. You got into this space, right? Was it something that pushed you into kind of this you know, this support sector of, you know, mental health, mental wellness? What actually got you into this particular field? Because, you know, we had a few, you know, psychologists on, consultants on, you know, and I guess what I often wonder is, was it something that triggered you to do this because of, you know, your own kind of life experiences, right? What actually got you into this field?
Yeah, I definitely feel like I fell into the work through life circumstance, kind of. So you guys mentioned earlier, I'm from New Orleans. Y'all know it rains there a lot and it floods there a lot. And so I actually happened to be a high school senior when Hurricane Katrina happened in 2005. And we lost everything. So we started life completely over, had to go to a new school for my senior year. My college applications were probably somewhere lost in the mail. I don't know, but eventually I made it. And I remember in that experience, observing my mother and my grandmother trying to just like hold our life together or piece our life back together. And I remember watching them have various ways of coping. And of course, at the time I was 17, so I didn't necessarily fully understand what they were doing to keep themselves together. And the irony, I guess, of it is I ended up, for my spring semester of my senior year, my high school, our teachers were amazing and went and cleaned up our school so that any of us who could get back to the city could kind of graduate together. And so my mom got me back to New Orleans so I could do that. And I took a psychology elective. I had one just open elective slot and took it. And that class opened up just a whole world language wise for me of explaining emotions and coping and being able to just better understand, particularly, you know, as a Black clinician and a Black woman, like that, growing up with psychology as a part of like your way of life is just not normal for us. It's changing, it's getting better now, but back then that just wasn't a thing. And so I didn't have anyone in my family to ask about having this as a career. And so that class changed my life. And then I went on to Florida State for undergrad, majored in psychology, just kept going, got my master's in clinical mental health, got my PhD in counselor ed, just to keep learning as much as I could, because I felt like, well, if that happened to me back, you know, at 17, I'm 36 now, and realizing that just having the right language to explain my feelings made a huge difference in my life, the trajectory of my life, then what could that look like, you know, to be that for somebody else? And so I started out just working broadly in clinical mental health, so not necessarily with athletes. I loved working with college age students. And so slowly that scope just got more and more narrow. And for the last 9 years, have worked with specifically athletes, but for the last about 15, 14, have worked with college age students on their mental health and wellness. And it's been a joy. It's awesome. Allowed me to be what would have been something I would have wanted back then.
That's awesome, Dr. Poole. That's great. Dr. Poole, I wanted to ask you about like far as contact sports, like football and boxing, like those are high physical injuries that can even cause mental health. Like what do you tell students, or what's your insight on those contact sports?
Yeah, it's tough. Obviously, football is a big one where, we see CTE, like a lot of injuries will happen, and sort of there's some repercussions mentally for people, usually in the long term. So they usually don't see the immediate impacts of things like that. But it's tough because by the time folks get to the collegiate and the pro space for both playing at a school like LSU or in the NFL. They usually have been playing like, park ball since they were like 4 or 5. Mm-hmm. And so it's really helping them to have a healthy balance of understanding, like, what does it mean to play as safely as you can in the sport like that, while also knowing most of the folks who play those sports, they love it. And it has become an outlet for them, sometimes mentally and emotionally, to be honest. And then helping them to figure out, what does that look like to elevate constantly, to keep themselves safe while knowing you're always kind of taking a risk when you go out there. And so I honestly don't worry as much about the players. It's like usually their parents and their families who are just so nervous for them all the time, which, I mean, to be fair, they have the right to be. Those are pretty dangerous sports. Part of it, though, is really from a performance perspective, learning how to play your sport safely. And that could really be for any sport, contact or not. Everybody should kind of think about it that way. What do I need to do to be the best at it, while also, being safe? So there's a lot out there to be leery of.
What are some of the signs of the CTE that you see? Like,
you'll see some memory loss. So things that people kind of see as traditional memory loss. You might see somebody becoming more irritable than normal. So, and this again usually happens after people have stopped playing their sport. So usually after a little bit of time, your brain has a little bit of time to not be in that sort of competitive mode, or still in a physical space of feeling like it has to be sort of fully protective of you to play the sport. It gives our brain sort of a exhale moment. And then once that happens, that's when you really start to see some of the signs of damage. So the memory loss, the irritability. Sometimes people will have depression or forms of anxiety as a result, and they won't necessarily have direct causes in the way that traditional depression or anxiety typically shows up. And so you really start to see almost like a shell of a person. Just most people in their lives don't recognize them in the same way. That can come in outbursts, or that can end up being maybe permanent for some people. It can be really scary.
Sorry. Hi, Dr. Poole. I was trying to jump in and ask a question. There's my mic. After listening to you talk about all the different health issues and challenges from these sports, do you, and playing safe, right? So you really have to learn how to play safe to avoid these things. Is that it? And I don't know, if they don't, like, is it worth it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So you do have to kind of learn to play your sport safely. Again, you could think of, we used like football as an example, but going back to our examples of like gymnastics, that's a dangerous sport. Like if you slip off of a beam, you can break your neck. Or I've seen examples of, young women in particular on, those events, like falling and literally seeing their legs dislocate. And I mean, that's scary. And so there's only so much you can do to protect yourself, obviously, when the sport itself is dangerous. I think that it does pose a lot of questions, and I get asked that a lot of like, is it worth it? And I think that's tough, as somebody who I was an athlete all the way up until high school and until Katrina happened. I didn't get my senior season of volleyball and track, but I recognize that, they are protective factors for us emotionally that come with playing sport. And so people who play those sports, they love it. Like athletes love what they do. There's a chemical sort of reaction that also happens for all of us the same way when we see someone we love or we get to do an activity that we love, our body and brains respond. There's almost, people talk about like a runner's high for people who love running and jogging, and like those same things happen in sport. And so it's tough as somebody who isn't putting in that work in the way that they are every single day to say like, do you give it up? Do you stop? Because you potentially could be hurt. And instead, maybe, again, helping to make sure that the education is there, and that the resources are there, particularly when you start talking about college sports, when you start talking about professional sports, those leagues, they owe it to those folks who are putting their mind and body on the line every day to make sure they have the best possible resources to avoid those long-term injuries like that. So it's tough. I feel like some of my athletes, if they heard me, would be like, Dr. Poole, don't tell me not to play my sport. But I mean, again, I am a person that's always like, well, how do we do this the safest way possible and make sure that we're just being proactive and looking out for things like the signs and stuff like that if something does happen. Because it's hard. It's hard on their family and friends afterwards when they don't get that same person back that they started, playing football when they were 5 and now they're 25 and they don't even recognize them anymore.
You don't want them to live in fear either. You want them to,
right.
You don't want to not do something because of you might get hurt, right? You just want to go do it and have fun and live that life. But when you talk about playing safe, especially in a sport like contact sport like football, right? It's not just for the youth to play safe, but for you to for yourself, but also playing safe for others. So for me, it's always like those, the dirty plays or things like that, because it doesn't matter how safe you are, somebody hits you and you don't know it's coming, and they,
That's right.
and they do it a certain way, intentionally. You gotta. It's all of those things too.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
Speaking of safe sports, Dr. Poole, the LGBTQ community, a lot of like transgenders are now playing sports where I guess like if you're born a male and now you're going against like a female, what's your input on that? Because that is a safety cause. Like, anatomically, men and women genetically are born differently. So strength is different. What's your insight on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it definitely is a hot topic right now, specifically in the collegiate space, just because that's a time where people are in places of discovery. They feel the most like themselves. They feel maybe freer to do that. And so we are getting more and more athletes who are comfortable in their identities, being able to say, well, I identify this way, and so I want to compete in this way as well. And so there's lots of controversy in the conversations for sure. But I mean, I think part of it has to do with the fact that, just like you said, like from an anatomical perspective, people have to be able to feel that they are equipped and prepared physically, no matter how they identify, to play their sport. And so what we're seeing is just people being able to kind of combat the spots where people aren't super happy about, maybe somebody who identifies a certain way now, to play within their league. I think we have to leave room for people to say that at the end of the day, I'm going to show up and train in the way that I need to compete at the highest level. And so I don't know that we will never probably have full consensus of the world on what it looks like for people to do so. But I think what you're going to see is that if we're going to say that sport is sort of this great equalizer in communities, and it's a universal space for people to be able to do something they love, like we were talking about earlier, I think there's going to have to be sanctions around what does that look like, to let people play freely while also, again, keeping things safe for people. So I don't think that there's ever been any final conclusion. I know the NCAA is rolling out policies all the time right now about what does it look like and what it will look like. And I don't think we're even close to done in seeing what that's going to be.
Thank you for that.
I'm sorry, my mic was cut off. I'm listening to you, and Dr. Poole. You amazing. I like you. I really.
I like y'all too. I like y'all too.
Yeah, I think I want you to come on a little more often. 'Cause I think you bring this professional scope that I think we can jump a little bit more in. So yeah, we gonna talk. We're gonna talk a little bit.
I'll come back anytime for y'all. Anytime.
For sure, for sure. Say that again, Lady
I
Esther.
said, especially when those big sporting events are coming up. You know, we
Yeah,
might need to yield to you for some insight.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. I want to jump into, when it comes to, okay, this is a question, right? Because you're amazing at what you do and your commentary as it relates to that. But I want to know, what would you tell, your younger you, right? That you something that you know now, right? That if you knew then, you would do differently based on the context of you understanding more of not only yourself, but more of the mental capacities of people, psychology, their movement, the quote out air quotes right from wrong, because we already know that dynamic,
It's
right?
relative.
It's
Yep.
relative, absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about that. What would you tell your younger you? Your maybe your 14, maybe your 12-year-old self. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely would, one, encourage me to be able to stay free and open. Like my mom raised me to be that kid that tried anything. So, and being from New Orleans, we do sports, we do music, we paint, we write, and so that's a part of like the culture there. And so I think from a sort of mental health and a wellness perspective, I don't know that I ever would have imagined that some of the things that I've now done and been exposed to and had, the ability to accomplish, that I saw myself doing that. And so I would just encourage me to be able to sort of be open to the fact that like, you can do anything you put your mind to. And I tell that to athletes all the time, obviously now, but I don't necessarily know that as a kid, just because I didn't have the knowledge, I didn't understand fully what it meant to take care of my well-being at that age, that I definitely would remind sort of little Lakeitha of that, and really just encourage her to get more involved in figuring out what is like taking care of yourself mentally, physically, emotionally look like, because we do all have stories. I know you said that earlier, of like most people who get into this field is because they have something about them. And I mean, I use Katrina as that turning point, but my life leading up to that, to the 17, also came with a lot. And so I think just encouraging me to be myself, to, do the work, like I say now to people, of figuring out who you are, but liking who you are, like genuinely liking who you are, no matter if you're different than other folks. And so, I think I turned out okay still, but I definitely could have used that more, I'm sure, from people around me, or having that knowledge for myself.
Yeah, you knocking out these questions. You killing me with this, right? And so yes. So why don't
I
you?
talk all day for a living. I get to do this. This is
It's
what I
all
do.
good. It's all good. So why don't you tell me, what's the legacy that you would like to leave?
That's a good question. I think about that a lot, actually, just having done this work now for a long time, and recognizing that in order to sort of practice what I preach, there has to come a point where being a clinician directly one-on-one won't be the way in which I would probably keep this work going or keep providing resources, just because it does weigh on mental health practitioners' minds. Like, I don't think people think all the time about us as the humans that we are, that's listening all day to other people's traumas and that sort of thing. And so I think for me, the legacy I'd really want to make sure that I left behind is one that's centered around embracing, wellness and rest. There's a lot of conversation right now that is trending, for particularly for people of color, around, rest being a right and not this thing that you have to earn, and this thing that you have to like work yourself to the bone to sort of earn from life. And so I definitely want to make sure that, in my own, children, or my family members, or my friends and my colleagues, to really make sure that they understand that concept of like being you and being a full, whole version of you that is well taken care of, well loved by yourself, is the greatest gift you can give to yourself. And so I just hope that people realize that. And I want more and more people to kind of realize that. And if I can leave that behind, then I feel like I will have, done my part and fulfilled my purpose. I know I can't touch every single individual in this world, but I feel like I will have conquered my little corner of the world.
What does a day looks like? What is a day in the life of Dr. Poole?
it's rough sometimes. A day in the life.
Walk me through it. Walk me through it.
It's just so different. So it could be different every day, right? So a typical day though for me, especially on campus, like at LSU, is a day mostly with individual sessions for all of our student athletes. So we have close to 500 student athletes at LSU, and I do have a small staff. So it's myself and two other clinicians, and so that's students doing walk-in sessions. Maybe they have a competition coming up, or maybe they have a mental health concern that they arrive to college with. And, maybe there's somebody who comes to see me weekly. So the day could be a mix of those types of folks. We also provide all the mental performance work for our teams, which is a little different than just your clinical mental health space. That's more of the things people think about, like your mental skills training, like visualization and, cueing and being able to sort of like get your head like in the game to be the best performer you can be. And so a lot of that work happens with teams. So in a typical day, I might wake up at 6:45 or so and meet with the beach volleyball team because they practice at 7 a.m. I usually get like 15 minutes before and do something with them, either deep breathing exercises, visualization, something like that. Then go into my day of individual sessions. Our volleyball team practices, our indoor volleyball team practices in the afternoon. So I might swing by there to either watch practice because maybe I have some observations to do of some individual athletes that I'm working with. And then I always try to end maybe stopping by. Football practice is intense, kind of because of the reasons we talked about earlier. So watching that both during the week and then Saturday night too can be a lot. And so sometimes I try to plan out when I pop by those types of practices, that and basketball and some of our other sports. And we're fortunate, we got a lot of different sports. So I get to go from being inside and outside all day and getting to do a lot of like just connecting with people, coaches and staff and our student athletes. So it's a fun day.
That's a long day.
You said everything about work and nothing about you, right? And so I'm talking.
I come at the end of the day.
Okay, that's what I want to hear. So what do you do to kind of settle down from all of the help that you helped everyone else, right?
That is a good question. Yeah, okay. I'm glad you put me on the spot for that. Yeah.
There you go.
So usually to wind down, and I wish I could say what time that usually is, but it varies, to be honest. And so whenever it's time to go home, I found myself more in my drive home. I really end up not listening to like music. Like when I'm coming in, especially if it's 5:45 in the morning, I'm coming in blasting. I love like all types of music, whether it's, New Orleans based like bounce music and Big Frida in the morning or something like that versus, being able to throw some Beyonce in there or something else. But in the evenings, just because I am trying to kind of give myself permission to let go of whatever everybody else has dumped on me. I try to make sure that, I give myself that quiet moment to drive home. And that's also before I might call and touch base with any friends or family members too, because I'm still a person to them. And sometimes they need me too as a person, not as their therapist, but, as their daughter or their friend, and they might be calling for advice or whatever. And so I try to just give myself that. And by the time I make it home, I usually cook myself some dinner, watch. I'm rewatching Scandal right now. I don't know if that's a good idea during election season to do that, but it felt like the right thing to do right now to keep my brain off of the fact that all these seasons of sports are about to start. And so I just make time to do that. I journal, I pray, I meditate. And so being able to just kind of give myself a routine so that I can, before I lay down for the night, have put aside from my mind and my body, like what the day has kind of dumped on me. And, and I think that takes a lot of practice too, though. I wasn't always as good at that, especially when I first got into this work, because working in athletics, like you guys heard, it starts so early in the day. And then, I can have a full day, like a normal work day that maybe my last person is at 5 o'clock, but now our women's basketball team might have a 7 o'clock game. Well, I'm not going to go home because I might not come back. And so I'm going to stay there, and the game now is not over till 9. And now I'm back at work the next morning for a 7 a.m. practice. And so I do make sure that I set some strict boundaries around my self-care when I can.
All right, there we go.
Dr. Poole, as I mentioned earlier with New Orleans, I don't hear the accent like I thought I was going to hear, but I know that you could bring it out. I know when you say
we always do.
Can we hear a little bit of the accent?
I think it depends on what you say. I know most people always get on us because people drag. I don't know how to not say it that way, but people always talk about us saying baby, and we say baby a lot, and that's a thing. And I think like it's interesting because being from New Orleans, I actually was talking to a friend about this the other day. In New Orleans, there are different accents within the city. So the example I always give is like if you're from uptown New Orleans, you might sound like Wayne, like Lil Wayne, versus if you a drawn out baby. And if you're from Gentilly or New Orleans East, we tend to talk a little faster. I grew up in the lower Ninth Ward and moved to New Orleans East when I was about 12. And so we just have this kind of speed to us, and always feel like we can't slow down when we talk. So, it's interesting. I think I don't notice it coming out until somebody points it out anyway. So it's probably some of the random things that we say. And then y'all know we make up words in New Orleans too, like in phrases, like we say make groceries instead of go to the grocery store. We say I'm gonna go make groceries. So it's just it's an interesting place. But
I heard it when you started explaining.
So probably because that fast talk came. Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna throw you a curveball here because you went through this time real fast, and I'm a little upset because you went through my time, right? And so this all good. No, it's just a joke. And so I want to know the one thing, right, that no one else knows about Dr. Poole that you could tell us now, right now. We Talk Weekly.
Yeah, one thing I think, and this kind of fits with what you're asking me about, like how do I decompress and escape from the work that I do? So my it's not a full out secret passion. I think people closest to me might know that I love it, but definitely not like our student athletes or other athletes that I work with. Is I am super, super passionate and love interior design, like random, like fun facts. And so it's interesting because I, no matter what, probably find a way to make that connected somehow to mental health. And so I recently have just been really like I took a class at LSU as an undergrad student randomly back in school again. And people are like, you got 3 degrees. Why are you back in school? But I think it's fun. Like it's something that it takes my brain off of, again, the day to day of what is usually pretty heavy work. And I get to then study like color psychology of why people paint their houses a certain color, or, what does it look like to match textures that, the feel of something for somebody makes somebody's energy feel different by when we sit on a leather sofa versus something that feels like vinyl or whatever else. And so I had no idea that interior design, which to me just felt like a fun, crafty thing, could also have this depth to it. And so now I tend to nerd out a little bit, but I feel like I'm doing that right now talking about it. But, I think that that's something a lot of people just would never guess that I would spend, my time doing between that and then like music. My dad was a musician. And so I grew up playing alto saxophone, and I don't think a lot of my athletes know that about me. And so those are things too that when I need to decompress and kind of turn my brain off and just need to do something that I don't have to put a lot of thought into, that's kind of like go-tos. And so now I'm letting my secrets out. Now people know.
There you go. Thanks for that. But fun fact, I have a certification in interior design, right?
What?
Yeah. So when you talk about color psychology, I was going to give you that little nugget. Yeah, but also understanding how rooms are set up, right? Makes people feel either claustrophobic or zen, right?
Yeah.
Color tone, so you can always think about that and put into your little basket of, your piece. So kudos to you, my friend, and we like you here. We like you.
I like y'all too.
Yeah. And so what we'll say is stay in contact with us. And we'll bring you back to the show. Once you come to the show, you're a friend to the show, so you're always welcome to come back.
Mm-hmm. Keep doing what you're doing, Dr. Poole. Thank you. We appreciate it.
That's right.
Thank you so much. Thanks, y'all, for having me. This was awesome. I never get asked stuff like this.
So before we let you go, you got to let everyone who's watching how they can get in contact with you, all that good old stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, if anybody's looking for me through LSU, if you put LSU and you put my name in, you'll find me. But if you're interested more just general mental health things, my private practice on Instagram is Go Small Talk Counseling. And the GEAUX is how you spell go in Louisiana, because everything's French there for us. And so you can find me there. You can find me personally. I kind of try to do a good job of tracking my adventures in sport and being in the consulting world around wellness, and on my personal Instagram, which is just at Lakeitha P. And so either of those, you can find me, find more. If there's any information I can provide to help someone in their mental health journey, please let me know. Happy to do that through those mediums.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Poole. We really want to give you a round of applause for that. Dynamic interview. We love you to death. So like I said, once you come to the show, you're a friend to the show. So you're always welcome to come back. And we're anticipating hearing from you soon. And if nothing else, you take care of yourself.
Yes, y'all do the same. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Poole.
Take care.